Continue to read Acts chapter 2. The Holy Spirit comes at Pentecost. When the day of Pentecost came, they were all together in one place. Suddenly, a sound like the blowing of a violent wind came from heaven and filled the whole house where they were sitting. They saw what seemed to be tongues of fire that separated and came to rest on each of them. All of them were filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak in other tongues as the Spirit enabled them. Now, there were staying in Jerusalem God-fearing Jews from every nation under heaven. When they heard this sound, a crowd came together in bewilderment, because each one heard them speaking in his own language. Utterly amazed, they asked, "Are not all these men who are speaking Galileans? Then how is it that each of us hears them in his own native language? Parthians, Medes, and Elamites, residents of Mesopotamia, Judea and Cappadocia, Pontus and Asia, Phrygia and Pamphylia, Egypt, and the parts of Libya near Cyrene, visitors from Rome, both Jews and converts to Judaism, Cretans and Arabs, we hear them declaring the wonders of God in our own tongues." Amazed and perplexed, they asked one another, "What does this mean?" Some, however, made fun of them and said they have had too much wine. Okay, so there's a lot here. Okay. This can go into what is a religious taboo subject or a subject that is still debated today. Okay, so let me read this portion here. All of them were filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak in other tongues as the Spirit enabled them. Then it goes on to say utterly amazed, they asked, "Are not all these men who are speaking Galileans? Then how is it that each of us hears them in his own native language?" So, in this instance, a lot of times when this is read, particularly in different aspects of Christianity and or religious theology, there's people who believe beyond that, beyond the languages that were said here. There is a group of people, there are people that believe that there is what they deemed as angelic language, language that is spoken not necessarily by humankind. And so, however, there's going to be aspects of it coming up, in particular when it comes to what's called speaking in tongues. So a lot of times when I read over this, time and time again, I read that people who were speaking in one language were able to speak fluently in other languages without having to go through our modern day learning method. You may have heard other languages around the world. You may have heard it, but have you studied to actually speak it? Or do you know just a few words or few terms and such? Whereas these disciples have became fluent. So they went from speaking their own language and maybe another language possibly to speaking other languages completely and fluently immediately. No studying, no, well, I think this word means this, or I think I know how to say this or ask. Complete fluidity, like complete knowledge. Also, so there's bringing past to present. There's that. Can the Holy Spirit gift something as task-worthy as language? Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. and more so, beyond our imagination. When it comes to speaking in tongues, particularly angelic language, that is a question for you in your relationship with the Lord. I want to caution, though. I want to caution because things that can come out of the mouth may not necessarily, or be influenced to come out of the mouth, may not necessarily be by the Holy Spirit. And there's ways to determine that. And we'll get to those the more we read, particularly about when it comes to this speaking and speaking of tongues. Before we go on, though, what kind of thoughts or feelings come to your mind when we read over this? How does it make you feel and what does it make you think?